This is Dr. Jerome Corsi. Today, it's Wednesday. It's September 13th, 2023. Thank you for joining us on thetruthcentral.com. And we are broadcasting a podcast every weekday. Let's get right into it today. There's a lot to cover. What happened yesterday, we now have finally Kevin McCarthy coming forward in the House, and he's going to begin the impeachment hearings. The House has begun the impeachment hearings of Biden. Now, it's about time. I mean, this took a long time to do. And what was being debated in Washington among the Republicans was, did they want to just let Biden ride out his term? And that if they did, they thought they could defeat him because he's done so miserably in every category. And by the way, I do not believe the polls that say that Trump and Biden are neck to neck even. I think it's already being rigged data. I think it's already being misreported or sampled in a way that is favoring the Democrats. It's not I don't see it legitimate because I can't imagine the country is really in favor of a president who is obviously suffering from senior dementia or some form of senior problem. Mental capacity should be in question given how he looks and behaves. And secondly, the economy is not improving. I know we have all this Bidenomics and all the hype about strong demand. It's all nonsense. I'm going to cover some of that later today. But the point is, and we've got the war going in Ukraine. We've got China, which is a constant menace to us. And Taiwan is on the edge. It could be invaded any day. And Biden's at the height of popularity. Give me a break. It's ridiculous. It's a joke. And all the corruption, this massive family corruption, which has been reported. I think finally, even the mainstream media has to report it. Although I'm sure the coverage on the New York Times and the Washington Post of this is very different. Let's just take a look at what the New York Times is saying for a minute. First of all, they don't even have it as the lead story in the New York Times. And so you'd have to go down a bit on the page before you even find out anything about the impeachment. I don't see any major coverage of it on the front page at all. And it's unbelievable how there's a story about President Biden's climate law is reshaping private investment. Another pumped up story about Biden. That's on the front page of the New York Times today. And the lead story is Russia overcomes sanctions to expand missile production, or overall prices set to pop in inflation report. I'll cover that in a minute. But there's, the coverage of the impeachment it wouldn't even be looking like it's going on. Let's see what the Washington Post is doing. I'm sure it's going to be the same. Let's go to it right away. I'll take a second here because I've got to get the browser ready to go there. Here we go. Okay, so the top story in the Washington Post is this Kim Jong, the North Korea pledges to back Putin's sacred struggle, and the death toll for the Libyan floods. That's the second story. Okay, so you have to scroll all. Again, they're not covering it. This is just not getting, and this will be the case until the impeachment trial actually starts, if it does start. And that's what's happening right now is that the Senate is putting together a case, and they're getting to, we'll have a floor vote on it, I'm sure, whether or not to impeach. That'll take a while. There'll be arguments about it in the House. The House first the House is where the impeachment occurs. I mean, that's where they vote to have a trial. So, you can be impeached once the House votes to have a trial. That's the impeachment. So in a sense, you can say that Donald Trump was impeached twice, which was correct. But he was not removed from office because the trial at the Senate has to convict him. And that failed twice for Donald Trump. So again, it's a two-step process. And I don't expect that the mainstream media is even going to cover it. They're going to act like it didn't occur. You have to go to the Epoch Times, which is covering it. They've got videos and the like saying the impeachment inquiry is launched, and they are making a point of it, but it's not being covered in general. And I expect it will be ignored, and the press will do everything they can to pump up Biden and to play down and minimize the information about all of the corruption, which has not also been reported the way it would have been had it been Donald Trump. Had it been Donald Trump, this would have been 24/7 on CNN and every other major network, but not if it's Biden. Okay, so the move is essentially, it is a change in strategy for McCarthy, who wanted essentially to run against Biden. I think that's a failed strategy because Biden is not going to be the candidate. I think Joel Gilbert is right that at the last minute, so she doesn't have to go through the primaries. Michelle Obama will say, I'll be the candidate. And then by acclamation at the convention, she can be the nominee. I expect some maneuver like that on the Democrats because they don't really want a primary. They don't want Kamala, and they know they have to get rid of Biden, but they don't know how to do it. And so therefore the Democrats might actually favor an impeachment, except that Kamala Harris would then be president, and if he was removed at the Senate trial. So it's a dilemma right now as to how to get rid of this guy, and both parties are thinking about how to do it, and neither party really wants to do it because, again, it's a strategy that it has lots of pitfalls to it. If it doesn't go a particular way, it could flip on either the Democrats or on the Republicans. Now, but again, the urgency of getting this done seems to me to be compelling. Chris, you want to comment on this? I think this is one of the biggest stories that we've had in several years. I'm just wondering how much it'll get covered.
The coverage isn't going to be front and center. The idea is they're going to use the Trump indictments and the Trump charges as the shiny keys to keep people away from thinking about the Biden impeachment. You highlight the Biden impeachment, you highlight the investigation into the son and the, of course, the potential that the Republicans have evidence of Biden's, the pseudonyms that he used to make deals, and they don't want to open up far enough. They don't want to call attention to the idea that Biden was doing business with China.
They don't want that.
Ukraine, right? They don't want that.
But it's going to come out. I mean, it's going to come out, and I think the American people in general are aware of it.
Well, here's what's going to happen. It's going to be a lot like the Clinton impeachment. The Clinton impeachment, one journalist just said it's all about sex, and it became that. When it really wasn't. It was about a lot more than that. It was about an investigation, about perjury. Again, I'm not going to go into that rabbit hole. The idea is the news media is going to focus on Hunter Biden and try to keep Joe clean. That's what it's been doing on the side for a little bit.
And they're also going to say father stands by son. That's another story they're going to run. Joe Biden supports his son.
Right.
So they're going to try all these emotional stories and all at the same time try to get the spotlight on Trump being prosecuted to shift the focus onto Trump. This is banana republic stuff.
Well, here's another thing. Something as trite as, let's put it this way. Joe Biden on Monday blatantly lied about where he was the day after September 11th. He actually said he visited Ground Zero the day after September 11th. Had Trump said something like that, even in hyperbole, there would be fact checkers and mega coverage of that for the first 5 minutes of each news program. Nothing. Virtually nothing on Biden.
Let's go to the next story. This war on cash and the de-dollarization. There's a very good analysis of this, I've been following it very, very closely. The BRICS nations, which are originally Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. Okay, now Dean Heskin, who I've interviewed and has been being interviewed here about this war on cash from Swiss America, and I have written a book with Dean. It is this book here on the coming global crash, and you can get one free if you call the 800 number, which is on the website. That's Swiss America Talk to Them. For those listening in audio, the 800 number is 800-519-6268. This book is previewing very accurately what's happening in terms of the inflation continuing. And it looks like tomorrow's inflation report will be back up to 6%. That's the forecast. You can listen to my interview with Dean on the website, get an analysis of how we see. I think the stock market is poised for a major crash in October. October is usually the month in which these things happen. I think it's going to happen this October. And I'm urging people, talk to Swiss America. If you get some gold, it could double in price with what's coming down. And if you have your retirement assets in the stock market and the stock market loses 10,000 points, you're not going to recover very fast. It's not coming back instantly. Now, the BRICS nations, what they're doing is they are essentially combining a very anti-American group. You've got Iran now joining Russia and China. And this is kind of the new axis of evil, as President George W. Bush called it, because these countries are all anti-American. They're all anti-dollar. The things that these BRIC nations want to do is control oil. So they are also merging with OPEC. We had 3 OPEC countries also invited. Iran is not an OPEC country, but it's an oil-producing company. 2 OPEC companies, Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates. So these are controlling oil, controlling anti-American terrorism fundamentally with Iran. And Russia's now supplying advanced weaponry to Iran. Iran's going to get $6 billion on this Biden prisoner swap, which they will use to make nuclear weapons, and they will use to advance terrorism in the Middle East. There's a solid movement going on right now to combine the Gaza Strip with the West Bank. Now, if you know anything about Israel, this would essentially put Israel almost surrounded by Hamas. And Israel, if they concede to this, there will be a major loss of sovereignty, I think, in terms of territorial sovereignty. And the Palestinians just keep chipping away. The Iranians supply the weaponry. So Israel's under constant attack from missile attack. And it's not reported here. But if Iran gets a nuclear weapon, Iran is going to use it. I've said this since 2006 when I wrote Atomic Iran. Now, if you get the control of oil, and Russia, since the sanctions, when President Biden imposed economic sanctions on Russia, which seized cash and took Russia off the SWIFT system, which is a system used in international trade to trade money. Well, if that happened, Russia said, we're not going to be subject to this anymore. The dollar's got to be taken down, and we've got to have our own international exchange capabilities. So they're de-dollarizing, and one of these countries, or the BRICS themselves, may create a gold-backed currency. Russia has been edging towards that when they demanded that their oil be bought in terms of rubles because their currency. People had to exchange gold to get the rubles. And central banks are loading up in gold right now. They've never been buying gold to the extent they are today. All the signs. Jamie Dimon came out, one of the major bankers in New York, and said, don't believe the Biden economics hype. The economy is not doing that well. I'm going to cover that in a minute. But when we get this kind of a coalition, this anti-American coalition formed and pushed together, which Biden has managed to do, by pushing NATO right to the edge of Russia, but trying to get Ukraine and Finland into NATO, well, you're infringing on Russia's sphere of influence. There's certain dynamics of geopolitics that have gone on for centuries. Go back to the Romans, which is, okay, so you want a buffer area around your country where you have a zone to divide you from your enemies. So Russia considers Eastern Europe, which is Hungary, Poland, Slovakia, all these countries, to be essentially their buffer zone. And Russia is one of them under Russian influence, just as we should want Cuba, Latin America, South America, Mexico, in our hemisphere to be influenced by us. That's your sphere of influence, which is a typical term of geopolitics going back to Metternich, who was a politician who did the original kinds of unifications of the states, balance of power in Europe. This was what held Europe together in the 1700s and the 1800s, leading up to World War I. It ultimately broke down, and we went into World War I and World War II, both of which Germany was at the center of. So you've got Russia saying they need access to the Atlantic through Finland, and they need access to the Atlantic through Sevastopol. I'm going to cover this a little bit later, probably focus on it tomorrow. I want to see it develop a little bit. But we had a massive attack on Sevastopol, and it's just developing. Massive missile attack, which looks like a massive escalation. If that's the case, and I'm seeing the pictures of it this morning, we're looking at a game-changing event in Ukraine. Because if Ukraine's decided that the offensive failed, which it did, that Ukraine's running out of people to conscript. They're going to have to conscript more people. People are leaving Ukraine in massive numbers. Ukraine is almost uninhabitable in its major cities. If we bring in what we're doing with F-16s, with Abrams tanks, with advanced missilery that can be GPS directed over great distances, such that we could strike Russia, and Zelensky feels like he's losing, and people are getting tired of this war. Ukraine is losing. The solution is, let's negotiate. Let Putin have the territory he's gotten. He's gotten control over eastern Ukraine, which is largely Russian territory anyway. These are Russian-speaking people, Donbass, that whole area. And he's got control over the Black Sea. Now, if Zelensky gets the weaponry and starts bombing Sevastopol or Crimea, or start taking out Russian ships Sevastopol is a major port for Russia. It's where they base a lot of their navy that is in the Black Sea. Black Sea goes out into the Mediterranean, goes out into the Atlantic, okay, through where Istanbul is, and also through the Straits of Gibraltar. This is the major passage for Russia into the Atlantic from the south. From the north, it's through Finland and through the Baltic Sea. Now, the Baltic Sea is surrounded now by NATO countries. It's becoming like a NATO lake. And that's threatening to Russia. Now, because states operate as, especially when they become superpowers, they become geopolitical entities that have certain dynamics of how they view geopolitics. And this buffer state is a very important concept in spheres of influence. And China has it as well. It's why China and India spar over territory. These countries don't like to be right up against a rival country. China and Russia have had the same problem. Now, if these countries begin to get together, if India starts resolving the border problems with China, and Russia and China and India together with Iran, and the oil-producing countries begin to align against the United States, when we are weakening our dollar by printing currencies, take some time and understand the geopolitics, because you're going to be following events here that are comprehensible. Read. You've got to do some reading. You've got to examine. I mean, as I write in this book, I say, through the last years of his presidency, Jimmy Carter struggled with the legacy of OPEC, oil embargo, which was in the 1970s, causing long lines at the gas pump to pay surging gas prices. After the 1973 embargo, the price of oil quadrupled, forcing the United States into a deep recession that lasted into 1975. Gold surged during this period of stagflation, the usual economic condition in which it's an unusual condition in which stagnant economic growth and high inflation coincide. In 1980, when Ronald Reagan was elected president, gold hit a high of $843 an ounce, largely because of the difficulties that Jimmy Carter did, and Jimmy Carter's difficulty extended through the 4 years of his presidency, but had an impact all the way into the 1980s. Paul Volcker had to come into the Federal Reserve, and interest rates were at 20% or higher. 22%, I think, was the highest. 2008, 2009, the collapse of the subprime mortgage market. People forget about these things. This is one of the things that put Barack Obama in the presidency. And the bursting of the real estate bubble caused a great recession in which prestigious financial institutions failed across the globe, and serious investors poured their money into gold. In 2010, gold hit $1,426 an ounce. Gold now is at $1,900 an ounce, bouncing between there and just under $2,000 an ounce. When the crash occurs, and by the way, during COVID, that's when gold hit its high, over $2,000.74, which it hit on March 8th, 2022. Gold could double in price. And take this seriously, because again, if you read the book, you'll see the economic dynamics. There are dynamics here which are repeating. And if you want to understand what's going on, take a look at it. Now, moving from geopolitics back to the domestic scene, the poverty rate in 2022 soared. You're not going to see this from the mainstream media, except that, an article will occur here. The New York Times published an article about it because the New York Times wants us to say we need more poverty aid. We have more redistribution of income. But the fact is, the Bidenomics are destroying the middle class. I cover that extensively in this book. Please read the dynamics. I'm talking about you and your family, what you're going to go through the next period of time. Just like I think we're going to go through another round of COVID. All the signs, the FDA just got emergency authorization for its new round of vaccine boosters, which were not tested thoroughly again. And even though there are serious concerns about the adverse effects of vaccinations with cardiovascular issues and other issues that need to be taken seriously, we're just going to herd people again into masks, shutdowns, lockdowns. It's all about social control. And the intent of the globalists is to destroy the middle class. Okay, so poverty increased last year in the United States. Poverty rate rose to 12.4% in 2022 from 7.8% in 2021. That's the largest one-year jump on record, according to the Census Bureau. Poverty among children more than doubled to 12.4% from a record low of 5.2% the year before. These figures are according to the Supplemental Poverty Measure, which factors in the impact of government assistance and geographical differences in the cost of living. So these are historically large increases in poverty. Okay, and that's going to drive the safety net programs that were in the pandemic. If they go away, you're going to have an even more painful situation. If they're reinstituted, you're going to have a bigger deficit. And we can't just keep printing money like this. We're now at $33 trillion and climbing very fast to $34 trillion in the federal national debt. And we're printing money to pay what's going to be $1 trillion a year in interest payments. This is a formula for a massive global recession. And American people are not prepared for it and don't see it coming. In the meantime, they're being engineered into electric vehicles, which don't work. They're being herded into another COVID scare. And the powers that be, which I don't think any longer are the governments per se. The World Economic Forum is very powerful because it has wide reach among this intelligentsia, the group that are military intelligence, the groups that are CIA, the groups that are corporate CEOs, international companies. There's a global elite emerging. And then there's the rest of the people mostly considered useless. They're not educated. They need to be taken care of. They've been trained to be on their cell phones 24/7. And this is a perfect formula for a massive, massive crash. So these increases follow 2 years of decline in the poverty, which was driven by all the money we poured out during the pandemic. Okay, we had increased and enhanced unemployment and nutrition benefits, increased rental assistance, expanded child tax credit, a brief period of a guaranteed income to families with children. Nearly all these programs have expired, and that means many of these families are now struggling as prices rise, and the market for jobs, which they continue to say is strong, is only for part-time jobs. And a lot of these jobs are going to be taken by the newly arrived immigrants. So we're not going to have a middle class that's employable. What are they going to do? And lacking skills, they're not going to be particularly useful in many jobs. So, and with increased automation, increased robots, increased machines doing work, this is not a particular. We are engineering a dystopian future on purpose. That's the point of my book on climate change. And Chris, if you'll show it, please. This whole idea of the lies of the climate movement, that we are really, carbon dioxide is not the temperature knob of the Earth's temperature. It's nonsense. We've had continents divide. We've had mountains rise. We've had lower carbon dioxide in the atmosphere today than 600 million years ago. We've had ice ages come and go. The sun is the major driver of Earth's light and temperature and heat. When the sun burns hotter, we have warming periods. When the sun burns cooler, we have cooling periods. The next book, I think, is going to be equally important because it's on the truth about neo-Marxism, cultural Maoism, and anarchy. We're headed towards anarchy because it's been engineered by this woke neo-Marxism. We're in the middle of a cultural revolution. The books I'm writing will help you to understand this, but it's going to take reading. It's going to take the time where you actually turn your computer, turn TikTok off, and understand what these forces are going on right now. I'm explaining them in ways you can understand them. And I want desperately for people to understand what we're being engineered through. Now, this is the next article that I think was the last one I want to cover today. There's stories coming out about how communist China is utilizing artificial intelligence. This is a report from Microsoft's Digital Threat Analysis Center, where Chinese affiliated actors are using artificial intelligence generated visual media to craft politically charged content in English to post on social media, Twitter or X, Facebook, all the social media, imitating as if they were U.S. voters who are posting these images. Now, this started in March 2023 with very sophisticated and high-quality AI images. For instance, just take an image of the Statue of Liberty brandishing an assault rifle. Now, that was a Chinese AI generated, intended, so it immediately activated the anti-gun lobby. And then it activated a group of people that were upset about the defamation of U.S. political figures and symbols. And it created a firestorm on the internet and was intended to create a firestorm. Okay, so these fake accounts and made up images use different actors to appear like legitimate Americans, including setting their public locations to within the United States. And they post American political slogans, sharing hashtags related to domestic political issues. Okay, so these images spread like wildfire, and they are incendiary because they're cleverly crafted. Yet they are fake social media accounts. Okay, and then the Chinese operatives are also paying Americans to protest in U.S. cities. Since the 2016 election, Russia reportedly used social media platforms to create division among U.S. voters. U.S. officials have warned the public that China and other countries might adopt this tactic in the future, and it combines a cyber warfare technique of psychological warfare using these images, which are very powerful, paying people to protest, paying people to cause division. And I saw an interview with Gordon Chang, who's a China expert whom I know. I've known him over the years. I really, truly respect his knowledge of China. And Gordon Chang is saying very strongly that our justice agencies are overwhelmed by investigations of these cyber attacks, and they're possessed, our Department of Justice, with investigating white supremacy and domestic terrorism. We're just on the past 9/11. Well, 9/11 with the terrorism that occurred, and I'm seeing a lot of videos questioning 9/11 for the first time, questioning, whether building number 7, why did it come down? What were these explosions about? The buildings don't fall the way those buildings fell. These issues have been raised for a long time, but I'm finally now seeing the videos resurface. That's different. We're seeing in this new book on JFK, one of the Secret Service agents who was in Dallas has come forward and written a book, the Final Witness, saying he picked up a bullet in JFK's limousine. Now, there's no documentation that that's true. He didn't report that at the time. He gave written reports of his presence, what he did that day, November 22nd, 1963, and he didn't report finding a bullet. But yet today it's making a wave because I think the American people are realizing how much we're lied to, and realize the creating of a artificial environment in which we live. In other words, if we think that this COVID is coming back, that's going to be a massive disease, we have to get vaccinated. People will go get vaccinated because they think they're going to get protected. Now, the vaccinations that we've already had, and we've had 2 or 3 rounds of vaccinations, how many boosters? I mean, people gotten 4, 5, 6 shots, and they still get COVID. But that doesn't discourage people from believing that if they get a shot, they're going to be less sick. And again, all of these constructed realities and artificial intelligence and the psychological warfare has gotten very good at this. If our Justice Department is running off after domestic terrorism, leaving the border wide open to any group of criminals coming across, we are intentionally destroying America. And if you think these are happening by accident, you're wrong. Barack Obama said he was going to fundamentally change America. Well, he has. And it's accelerated since Donald Trump came on the scene. And we're right now in the middle of it. Chris, any comments?
It's funny. Communists around the world know how to find the ingrates. The far left know how to find the people who will get triggered and start posting things all over social media, this way to cause unrest. We have these fringe blogs that seem to get mainstreamed, complaining about one of these things or another. You have to suspect what's going on here. And this whole idea about I remember we don't have to remember, for the last six plus years, all we heard from the left is Russian disinformation. They never, or barely ever, aside from maybe a select few in a committee meeting, discuss Chinese or Chinese Communist Party misinformation. There has to be a reason for that.
Well, and again, the construction of these narratives and what social media, which set out to be this great, forum where everybody could express themselves and debate and argue, has become a psychological warfare battlefield where constructed messages are creating a reality and debates and controversy is created intentionally to distract and divide. And the intelligence agencies have been very good at this. And we are now in a situation where people are losing the ability to distinguish whether they're in a metaverse or they're in a reality. And when the media don't report reality, they report the metaverse. It reinforces people living in this artificial reality in which they're fearful of COVID. They're, looking at going out, and $100 doesn't buy very much at a grocery store anymore. And they don't understand that this is a constructed reality that is intended to destroy America. And if we don't, the massive changes it would take, I'd move the entire bureaucracy to Death Valley and give them all the solar and wind they want. They can create their own air conditioning out there. They're so brilliant with it. Let them go do it in Death Valley. These things they're constructing don't work, and they're designed to destroy. The depopulationists are in full reign right now, and it is a very, very dangerous time, with the potential, I think, increasing that we will see nuclear war soon. Chris, any final comments?
Well, you summed it up perfectly, Jerome. I do want to tell our audience, though, before we leave, that you heard about the book, How the Coming Global Crash Will Create an Historic Gold Rush by Dr. Corsi and, of course, Dean Heskin. By calling the toll-free number 800-519-6268. Keep in mind, if you're watching or listening and you missed the number, you can always rewind and check back. But also, the phone number and the links for our sponsors are in the description of the podcast and each video. So check that out. And, of course, don't forget to follow Dr. Corsi on Twitter it's at Corsi Jerome 1. See us on Facebook. That's the Truth Central. And we're all over the place.
Well, thanks, Chris. And also check out my Vital C. People are saying I look younger. I'm not coloring my hair. Colors come back into it. This is a miracle molecule. Try my Vital C. And we have a new book out on that. If you'll take a look, just beginning to get in, Live Longer and Better, which I've written with Chris Burries. It's really his story of how my Vital C was brought to be with the discovery of this carbon-60 molecule. There are versions of the My Vital C for pets. I've been taking it for 4 years, and I swear by it. I think it's a miracle molecule as far as I'm concerned, and I encourage you to try it. Okay, today, this is Dr. Jerome Corsi. Today, it's Wednesday, it's September 13th, 2023. In the end, God always wins. God will win here, too. If I hesitate to think of what the judgment of God might be on us. Join me, please, in getting down on our knees and asking God to forgive us for allowing God to be taken out of our schools and our lives, our marriages, our education of the children. Forgive us for all the children that were millions that were killed in the womb. We have sinned against God in a massive way, and we must beg forgiveness and grace. If spirit of 2 Chronicles 7:14, the formula God's given us is to do that, and God will hear our plea and heal the land. Our land needs healing. Dr. Jerome Corsi will be back tomorrow. Thank you for joining us. TheTruthCentral.com. Please like it. Please share it. Please tell others. We are broadcasting every weekday. Thank you for joining us. God bless.